The first thing everyone at Halvorsen Medical Systems learned about Lena Brooks was that she left early. Not every day, not often, but on the one day that mattered, she packed her bag at 4:45, shut down her terminal with the same quiet precision she did everything else, and walked toward the elevator, while the rest of the executive floor buzzed with after-hours urgency. And that was when CEO Grant Halvorsen himself stepped out of the glass conference room, tie loosened, jaw tight, eyes sharp with the authority of a man accustomed to obedience, and he watched her go with the kind of look reserved for disappointments that did not yet know they were disappointments, because in his world, people who mattered stayed late, people who mattered sacrificed, people who mattered did not have excuses. And he said her name, not loudly, not kindly, just enough to stop her. Lena Brooks. And when she turned, already bracing, he asked if she thought her time was more valuable than everyone else's. And the hallway went silent, in that way that makes a moment heavier than it should be. And Lena felt every eye, every unspoken judgment, because she was the single mother, the mid-level data analyst, the woman who never joined drinks, the woman who declined last-minute meetings, the woman whose badge was known more for punctual exits than flashy entrances. And Grant Halvorsen did not ask why. He never did. Powerful men rarely do. He simply scolded, reminded her of company expectations, of loyalty, commitment, of how many people would kill for her job. And Lena nodded, because explaining took energy she had learned to save, because defending herself had never once changed the outcome, and because she had already checked her phone 3 times and seen the same message flashing in her mind. ICU transfer delayed, patient unstable, pediatric emergency inbound. And she said she understood. She always did. And she walked away with her head down, while the verdict was silently delivered. Unreliable, ungrateful, replaceable. And Grant watched her leave with the satisfaction of authority exercised, unaware that in that same moment his own daughter was being wheeled through emergency doors 3 floors below street level, her heart rhythm erratic, her oxygen dropping, her life hanging on seconds, not policies, not profit margins, seconds. And Lena Brooks was the only person in that building who knew exactly what those seconds were worth. Lena did not always work in corporate offices with glass walls and silent judgments. She used to wear scrubs, used to run on adrenaline and instinct, used to be called Dr. Brooks before her husband died in a freeway accident and left her with grief, debt, and a 3-year-old son who needed a mother more than patients needed another specialist. And so she stepped away, traded trauma rooms for spreadsheets. But medicine never truly leaves you. It waits, it listens, it stays sharp in the background. And when the call came from an old colleague earlier that afternoon, a rushed whisper of words, rare congenital condition, hospital systems glitch, medical history locked behind corporate firewall encryption. Lena's breath caught, because Halvorsen Medical Systems owned that firewall, because the CEO's daughter had been admitted under emergency anonymity, because the algorithm Lena herself had helped design flagged a data conflict no one else noticed, and because leaving early was not about daycare or dinner or convenience. It was about getting to the server room she was not supposed to access anymore. It was about manually overriding a permissions gate that could take hours to escalate through official channels. It was about retrieving a suppressed childhood cardiology report that could change a treatment plan before the wrong drug shut a young heart down permanently. Upstairs, Grant Halvorsen was already forgetting the interaction, filing Lena under the mental category of disappointments, turning back to quarterly projections and investor expectations. While downstairs, a team of doctors argued over protocols, unaware that the missing piece of the puzzle existed, encrypted, archived, and seconds away from being lost to bureaucracy. And Lena moved through the building like a ghost. Keycard access she technically still had, fingers steady, mind racing, every step echoing with the weight of what could happen if she was caught, fired, sued, arrested. Because doing the right thing is rarely protected by policy. And as she worked, she remembered the last thing her husband said to her before he left that morning. Take care of them, all of them. And she whispered, I am trying. As the file unlocked, as the data appeared, as the truth confirmed what her instincts already screamed, that the current treatment would kill her. And Lena did not hesitate. She sent the file. She called the number she was not supposed to have. She spoke with authority she had buried for years. And she said, stop, change course, trust me. And somewhere a monitor stabilized. A medication was pulled back. A doctor hesitated just long enough to listen, and a life tilted away from the edge. The next morning, the building buzzed with a different kind of energy. Rumors, whispers, an emergency averted. A CEO's daughter saved by an anonymous intervention. And Grant Halvorsen stood before his board with gratitude and relief, cracking his usually unbreakable composure, praising systems, teams, resilience. When the hospital chief arrived unexpectedly and asked for Lena Brooks by name, and the room froze, and Grant's face tightened not with anger but confusion, because he did not associate Lena Brooks with heroism. And when she was escorted in, wearing the same quiet expression, the same unassuming posture, Grant barely recognized her as the woman he had dismissed. And the chief explained, calmly, precisely, how an internal analyst had identified a fatal oversight, how she had acted without hesitation, how her background in medicine had saved a child, how that child was Grant Halvorsen's daughter. And silence fell like a reckoning, because power had shifted, not loudly, not theatrically, but completely. And Grant felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine, humility, and he looked at Lena, really looked, and saw not a liability, but a protector, not an inconvenience, but a guardian. And in that moment, the man who ruled rooms understood how small his authority truly was. Lena did not smile, did not seek praise. She simply said she needed to leave early again, because her son was waiting, and Grant nodded, because for the first time he understood that real power does not announce itself. It acts, it sacrifices. It chooses life over ego. And as Lena walked away once more, head held higher this time, Grant realized the lesson was not over, because the systems that nearly killed his daughter were still in place. The culture that dismissed quiet integrity still thrived, and justice had been served only partially. And as the elevator doors closed behind Lena, Grant's phone buzzed with a message that made his blood run cold. Internal audit triggered. Historical data irregularities detected, source unknown. And somewhere in the building, a truth much bigger than one life began to surface, leaving the question hanging in the air. Who else had been underestimated? And what else was about to be revealed? Grant Halvorsen did not sleep that night, not because of the board's praise or the press quietly preparing a redemption narrative about a father grateful for a miracle, but because of the message that had followed him home like a shadow. Internal audit triggered. Historical data irregularities detected, source unknown. And as the city lights blinked outside his penthouse window, he replayed every decision he had made over the past decade, every shortcut justified by growth, every warning softened by power, every quiet voice he had dismissed because it did not shout loudly enough to be heard in rooms built for men like him. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, a truth began to settle. Lena Brooks was not an exception, she was a symptom. And if one underestimated woman could nearly expose the fault lines of his empire, how many others had been buried beneath it? By morning, Halvorsen Medical Systems was no longer humming with routine efficiency, but vibrating with tension. Security access logs frozen, servers mirrored, executives summoned without explanation. And Grant stood at the center of it all, feeling something dangerously close to fear, because control, once cracked, never returns quietly. And when the audit team confirmed what the message had hinted at, that proprietary patient data had been suppressed years ago to fast-track experimental partnerships, that safety flags were overridden to protect timelines, that lives had not been lost only because of luck and silent interventions no one ever credited, Grant understood the true cost of his leadership, and it was not measured in stock value, but in near misses, in names that never made reports, in people like Lena Brooks, who carried the moral weight of an institution that rewarded silence over Courage. Lena, meanwhile, was at her small kitchen table helping her son with homework, unaware that her name was spreading through executive corridors, like a whispered verdict. Because she had not acted for recognition, she had acted because she could not live with herself if she did nothing. And when her phone rang late that afternoon and Grant Halvorsen's name appeared on the screen, she hesitated. Because power rarely calls to apologize, it calls to negotiate. And she had learned that lesson long before corporate offices ever taught it to her. Grant did not speak like a CEO when she answered. He spoke like a man stripped of certainty. And he told her the truth. About the audit, about the years of decisions, about how close his daughter had come to being another footnote, and he asked her to come back, not as an analyst, not as an employee, but as a leader, as someone who could help dismantle the very systems she had outgrown. And Lena listened quietly, because power shifts again when the underestimated are asked to fix what the powerful broke, and she told him no, not yet. Because justice was not a promotion, was accountability. The following week, the story broke. Not the sanitized version Grant's PR team wanted, but the real one. Whistleblower protection invoked. Internal documents leaked legally, patterns exposed, and Halvorsen medical systems faced investigations that could not be bought or buried. And Grant stood before cameras, not as a savior, but as a man forced to answer. And in that moment, Lena watched from home, her son beside her, and she felt something she had not felt in years. Not victory, but relief. Because truth, once freed, does not need applause to matter. Grant resigned before he was forced to, not as an escape, but as a statement. And in his final address to the board, he said the words no one expected, that the company's greatest failure was not technical but human, that it had mistaken obedience for loyalty and silence for competence, and that the person who saved his daughter had also saved his conscience. And when he stepped down, the room did not erupt, it reflected. Because power had finally learned to listen. Lena never returned to corporate life. She returned to medicine on her own terms, opening a small community clinic funded quietly by a trust Grant established without his name attached. Because some lessons are meant to be paid forward, not advertised. And years later, when a young analyst left early and no one questioned why, the culture had shifted enough to pause, to ask, to care. And Lena would tell her son, as he grew older, that justice is rarely loud, that real strength often looks like walking away, and that the most dangerous thing a powerful person can do is underestimate someone who still knows how to save lives. And as the screen fades, the final truth lingers. Power does not belong to those who hold it longest. It belongs to those who use it to protect others. And once that truth is learned, it cannot be unlearned.